Welcome into the Behind the Wall post game show sponsored by Campus Steaks. Go check them out downtown State College on Pew Street. Penn State handled the Washington Huskies this past Saturday. It was the fourth, pretty much, whiteout of the year, it feels like. It feels like we're wearing white every weekend, but nonetheless, a fantastic atmosphere. The Penn State fans do it again. And it was really just the type of game you want to see after a just emotional, heartbreaking loss against Ohio State. That is how you bounce back and be dominant, specifically up front, where I think all year you did the bullying. Then Ohio State comes in and really, I mean, on both sides of the ball, handles you guys up front, being Penn State, and then they come back and say, all right, we got to get our lick back from last week. We're going to show Washington what's up, and boy, did they ever. Let's start out with the Penn State defense. This is the stat of the year. You guys know I love my stats, but I have truly never heard a stat more impressive and just outright crazy. The Penn State pass rush against Washington, they registered 24 pressures. The Washington quarterbacks only dropped back to pass 23 times. So Penn State had more pressures than they had dropbacks, which means that there was multiple plays, I'm sure, where multiple guys were getting pressures on the quarterback. I mean, it's just crazy what Washington was not able to do up front, really. And it all started. They came out with a 7-minute drive that they got no points on. I mean, that was pretty demoralizing for Washington, I think. But it was very clear quickly on. Tom Allen said, "Okay, we're going to give them a little bit underneath," and that's all they were taking. Underneath, quick throws, quick slants, running the ball, and very quickly that was taken away, and Washington had nothing else to go to. Number one, Jonah Coleman, their running back, who I told you guys to look out for, a really shifty guy. Even the first couple plays, I was like, oh man, we got to get ready for this guy. I'm a little bit worried. He finished with 11 carries for 24 yards. That is how you minimize a running back that has been a pain for a lot of defenses all year long. As a matter of fact, you held them to 74 total rushing yards. And as I mentioned in my pregame show, they had yet to have been held under 100 yards rushing in any game this year. So we were the first team to do that. And as I said, 74 yards rushing. They had 74 yards rushing. 43 of those came on the final drive versus our backup defense. I think we blitzed 6 or 7 guys, and then Damon Williams Jr. Took off. So that's where a huge chunk of those yards. So that's even a little overinflated 74 yards is. We dominated them up front. The front seven just took care of business. 5 sacks, 24 pressures, as I mentioned, which is an insane number, and then 9 tackles for loss. So that gives you a good idea of not only could they not pass the ball, there was pressure in Will Rogers' face and Damon Williams, whoever they decided to put in at quarterback. They played so well. They obviously had to bench their starter, and they kind of went a different route. But just being that dominant in the pass rush and the run game doesn't allow an offense to breathe. And you saw that from Washington. It was very clear they were not going to be able to keep up with us. I think Zane Durant continues to play dominant football. He was the third highest graded defender in the entire game. And he doesn't really get enough love, I think, because he plays defensive tackle. Kind of similar to offensive line play, how you do a lot of the dirty work, but you don't really see any of the stats. But Zane Durant is continuing to solidify himself as one of the best defensive tackles in all of college football, but does not get enough love. Now, Abdul Carter, last week against Ohio State, had 2 sacks and didn't really 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, and it didn't get mentioned because of the way we lost to Ohio State. It really felt like there was nothing to celebrate from that game, but that got overlooked. Abdul Carter showing up at big time moments, and obviously the offense just couldn't get it done. But he has really came on, and there was a lot of talk all year about if Abdul can be the most productive at pass rusher for Penn State, or is he better at an off-ball linebacker position? I think there's still a little bit of argument to make just because he is that dynamic. But I will tell you, he's dominating. 2 sacks, 4 tackles for loss in this game against Washington. And funny enough, that's actually the second time this year he's had that stat line, 2 sacks and 4 tackles for loss. The second one was against Illinois. So clearly Abdul Carter likes whiteouts, and he performs well in them. But and a fun stat from PFF, Abdul Carter has a 40% pass rush win rate against Washington. So that means when Abdul Carter lined up, 40% of the time he was winning the rep. Now, how a win is defined is pretty much, I would say, a pressure. And so Abdul Carter had a lot of those. I think he had 7 or 8 pressures on the day. and really just making whoever lined up at quarterback for Washington making their life hell. Now, a couple more players to talk about from this Washington game on defense. Kobe King is playing elite football once again. Uh, Last year really finished off a great season, his third season last year. Coming into this year, expected a lot out of Kobe. The linebacking core as a whole struggled a little bit early on, but Kobe's playing some damn good football. And Coach Franklin said that in his press conference on Monday, that saying, "Hey, we haven't been rotating as much at linebacker, specifically middle linebacker, because number one, we're a little banged up, but number two, Kobe King is playing some of the best football of his life." So being recognized there, and that is one of the reasons why Washington couldn't run it anywhere. And we've been doing this for weeks. I mean, obviously Ohio State, that was a little bit of an exception, and it feels like it always is for us. But same thing with Wisconsin. Dominant run game came in, and I think guys like Zane Durant and Kobe King made all the impact as to why that team could not do what they normally like to do with running the ball. Now, someone that is struggling a little bit is Tony Rojas. He obviously seems like he is a little banged up. And trust me, guys play hurt, and you don't hear about it as a fan. So you kind of just assume, oh, they suck. But really, they're playing through whatever, a shoulder injury, a knee injury. So something to keep an eye on. Obviously, he has not been as dynamic as we had hoped he would be coming into this year, but still a very athletic player. I still think honestly one of the most athletic guys when he steps up on the field. So a lot to put together for Tony Rojas still. Hopefully, he can start to really put it together on this back end of the season. But I think heading into next year, there needs to be a big step up for Tony Rojas heading into the 2025 football season. Now, last guy on defense I want to talk about is Jalen Reed, another guy who I don't think gets enough credit, especially nationally. And it may be because KJ Winston kind of overshadowed him the offseason, but Jalen Reed is playing the best football of his life. And you can't help but wonder what it would be like if KJ Winston was here too. If we could have two of the best safeties in America back there together, and not even just back there, because Jalen Reed plays up and around the line of scrimmage, and he is very effective when he does that. So hurts not to have KJ Winston, but at the same time, obviously Jalen Reed's playing some great ball. He's been a ball hawk as of recent, has a couple interceptions against USC and then against Washington. So being in the right place at the right time isn't just necessarily a coincidence. Jay Reed has those instincts, and that's something that Poindexter and a lot of the coaches have said, hey, and I've even talked to guys, Jaquan Brisker, Jair Brown, that say, hey, that guy is just instinctually different on the field. Jalen Reed is a special football player. Let's transition over to the Penn State offense. The run game got back on track. 266 yards, and they were averaging 6.7 yards per carry. That is dominance up front. It's fun to watch. Katron Allen is alive, running well. I've said this before, a couple clips that I've put in. Katron Allen looks so much like Le'Veon Bell sometimes with his hesitation, and when he decides to, number one, they both had great vision, but when he decides to hit a hole, he's hitting it and he's going through it, and no one better try to stop him. I think he was actually asked after the game, and he basically said, "I prefer to run through people." That was Katron Allen's quote. So pretty fitting for the type of guy that Katron Allen is. Anthony Donko is playing lights out, and a guy that is basically has the whole left side of his body is just messed up. It's his shoulder, his ankle, doesn't matter. He is easily the best offensive lineman on this team, and I think one of the main reasons why the run game is so successful, highest graded offensive lineman in this game. And really, we saw when he was really hurt and also not playing, we saw the effects of the run game, of the pass game too, the pressure on Drew. So having Donka healthy means a lot to this offense. But you guys know I love my Katron Allen stat. When Katron Allen rushes for 80 or more yards, Penn State was 12-0. Now it is 13-0. And it's funny, I give that stat because I like it so much because I think it's just a good representation of when Katron Allen really gets going, that means that the offensive line got going, because he's not Nick is more of a guy. Nick Singleton can find something out of nothing. Katron Allen is more, if you give him just a little crease, he's going to make something great out of it, but he needs a little room to work with. He's not exactly a magician in the sense of just making room out of nowhere and, juking guys, that type of thing. That's not Katron Allen. So I think the reason why I love that stat so much when he goes for 80 or more yards is because it's kind of a representation of the offense as a whole and what the offensive line is doing. And they did a hell of a job. And speaking of that, that is why Penn State punter Riley Thompson, the Aussie, did not step on the field on Saturday. Fun fact there too. He did come on. Obviously, he is the holder for field goals and extra points, but he did not step up on the field as a punter on Saturday. Penn State, I believe, every drive ended in a touchdown, except obviously the final drive just ended the game, and then we had the fumble from Tyler Warren. But outside of that, every other single drive was a touchdown for Penn State. And speaking of those touchdown drives, gotta tip your cap to Kotelnicki. Yes, had a bad week last week. We got outcoached. We saw that. We saw it on the film breakdown. We know it. But he learned from his mistakes. He gave Tyler Warren the ball 2 times in the red zone and really the goal line, and Tyler Warren scored both times. And I think that was a lesson, and I think Kotelnicki basically said to himself, Lord, give me this opportunity. I'm not going to screw it up again. I am going to give the ball to Tyler Warren near the goal line. Because it only makes sense. Would you have a 6'6", 265-pound tight end that can fly over top of people? It's a good idea to give him the ball near the goal line, and good things happened. So 2 really nice touchdowns, some great push from the offensive line on those touchdowns too, and I just love to see Tyler Warren getting involved still, and teams are not really able to scheme him out of the game, except for Ohio State. leave that last week. Corey Smith deserves a shout out, a running back who was a young freshman and really got an opportunity with Nick Singleton getting banged up, but had a 78-yard run. Cool to see him break that off. And I think after losing Cam Wallace for the year, maybe we found a little bit of that third speed back that I think we were missing. Quentin Martin Jr. has also been banged up to this point in this year. So we don't really know who we're going to see next week. And that kind of goes right into the Nick Singleton injury. Coach Franklin described it as a short-term injury. We do not know what that means. But I would venture to guess that Nick Singleton really shouldn't play this week. This Purdue team is far and away the worst team in the Big Ten. It's not even close. Now, will Coach Franklin do that? Who knows? But I think that would be the smart thing. We do not need Nick Singleton for Purdue. I can promise you that. But make sure he is healthy. That is all I will say on that. But let me know your thoughts. Do you want to see Nick Singleton this weekend against Purdue? And maybe another one of those kickoff return touchdowns that got called all the way back. That was a heartbreaker coming out of halftime. That was going to really just finish Washington off and get the second half going. And then it got called back for Coach Franklin said in his Monday press conference, he thought it was a fair call. I think it was on Luke Reynolds, I believe. That the holding on the kickoff return, I was not a fan of it. I think Franklin was, I don't really know, but he was just maybe saving face, didn't want to critique the refs, but I thought it was honestly overall a bad call. But what wasn't bad was Drew Aller. Drew Aller looked really good. I think a little conservative at times, could have stretched the ball down the field a little bit more, but overall, I like what we saw from Drew. Good decision-making and getting Trey Wallace the ball early. I have been begging for it all year. We haven't done it really truly since West Virginia, where we got him involved early and often, and that is what we did Saturday. It felt like he was always open. He makes the plays when they need to be made, and we're able to hit them. Think about it. There's a couple times we hit him on that deep dig, and what a deep dig is, that's about 15 yards up the field, and then an in route, pretty much. That's what a dig is, an in route. And there was multiple times Drew Aller hit Trey Wallace on that deep dig, and Trey was open, and also Drew Aller was sitting in the pocket cleanly. I mean, some of those pockets that Drew Aller had, he had all day back there. Beautiful protection. There was nobody in his face. 0 sacks, 0 tackles for loss from that Washington defense. That's utter domination up front for this Penn State offensive line, and also allowed Julian Fleming to get his first career touchdown in the blue and white. So overall, I like what I saw from the offense. Franklin was asked about stretching the ball down the field, which we still really didn't do, and we still really haven't done truly since USC. So let's do that against Purdue next week. I think against a bad Purdue team, Amari Evans, get him a deep ball, throw it up to Trey Wallace, let him make a play. But funny enough, Franklin was talking about it. He used the exact lingo, chuck it down the field. Franklin did in his Monday press conference. And for those that do not know, it is a long-standing joke. Well, not really that long, but back to last season, that Corey Geiger, who is no longer on the beat, asked the question. I think it was after It was like midway through the season. And he said, "Why don't you just chuck it up, Coach Franklin?" And it was this whole situation, and it was not a great situation. It made Franklin very angry, but that was probably one of the most infamous beat writer quotes. Why don't you just chuck it up? So Franklin, every time he gets an opportunity to like make fun of it or say something about a deep ball, he'll always reference it. So I appreciate Coach Franklin's comedic relief. Sometimes I don't know if Corey Geiger finds it as funny as everything that happened to him, but hey, hey, we got to keep a little levity around in your life, man. But overall, the creativity was back for Kotoniki. If you want to check that out, check out 4 downs from the Washington Penn State game. I just put that out yesterday. But it was back, and it was because the run game was back. The offensive line dominated up front, pass and run. So it let Drew sit back there, deal the ball. We were able to rush up and down the field, and it was a good day to get back on track for Penn State. Looking ahead, we have Purdue this week. Then we at Minnesota, and then after Thanksgiving weekend, we will see how many Nittany Lions fans make it in to Beaver Stadium with that Maryland game. But this week we have Purdue. I am going to put out a Purdue film breakdown, maybe probably Wednesday, of what to look out for. It's going to be more of probably just like a laughing session of how bad Purdue is. So be on the lookout for that. It should be fun to kind of just look where can we really just exploit this team at. It's going to be fun. So make sure you guys tune into that. I think this Purdue team is bad. I mean, 2019 Idaho level bad. If you remember, we played them week 1, 2019, beat them by like 76-0. That is how bad I think this Purdue team is. But we will get into that the rest of this week. I appreciate you guys tuning in to the post-game show here. Please like, comment, subscribe, leave your thoughts below. Peace.